Today is episode 68 with Dr. B.
Welcome to the Living Beyond ADHD podcast. If you're looking for a fresh perspective and actionable steps on hot topics from focus to follow-through to self-management and more, you are in the right place. Welcome your host, innovative educator, coach, and psychotherapist, Dr. B.
Hey, DDers. I'm so glad that you could join me for today's episode, Executive Function Basics, about focus, priorities, and effective decision-making. I wanted to share some important tools with you that I've been teaching students for a while. Without the skills to focus, prioritize, and make effective decisions, you're most likely going to be stressed and spinning your wheels a lot, seeing very little results at the end of each day. And like you, I know how awful that feels, and I'm grateful to have developed the skills that I needed to do these things more easily and teach them to others like you so they're less stressed as well. I trust the information in this episode is going to give you a start at developing these critically important skills and lessening your stressors, especially during this holiday season when there is so much more to focus on, prioritize, and of course, make decisions on. Many of you have written to me and said that you feel overwhelmed by just how much needs developing in you, and you just don't see how you can do it. The quick answer is, one skill at a time will make your life that much easier and more enjoyable. It's so worth it. There's no quick fix here. However, there are solutions that can last you for the rest of your life if you learn, apply, and integrate them into your life. So to the best of your ability right now, let's set aside blame and guilt and all those negative feelings and get started developing the skills that you need so that they can make a significant difference in the quality of your life. As more and more of you connect with me in my Facebook group, Living Beyond ADHD, I'm learning that even those of you who aren't yet working with me directly are feeling a sense of relief and hope from my podcast show, as well as waves of overwhelm at the vastness of what lies ahead of you, now that you know more of what the real issues are. Please stop for just a moment. We are not going to climb that mountain all at once. At least I don't recommend it. When I climbed to the top of Mount Whitney here in California years ago, and many other climbers were doing the 24 hours up and down challenge, I saw no glory in that at all. It was overwhelming to me to think of making the 15,000-foot climb in 24 hours. I wanted to enjoy the climb and not hurt myself by pushing too hard or too fast. I opted to take 4 days to make the climb up that 15,000 feet or so and then back down, camping along the way. Did I get to the top just like the day climbers? Yes. Was the climb an accomplishment for me? Yes, absolutely. So fast or more slowly, both the day climbers and I accomplished our goal and enjoyed the climb. I want you to enjoy the journey of developing your executive function skills more fully, not hate the process and resist doing what needs doing. That won't serve you at all. I know that many of you have been diagnosed later in life or became aware of your ADHD and executive function challenges later in life and are hurting and grieving your missed opportunities or failed marriages or academic failures, and so much more. The grieving period will pass, and then it's time to move forward. The years behind us, they're spent. The years ahead are hopefully many for all of us, and time is going to pass whether we develop these skills or not. It's a matter of priorities and deciding how ready we are to move beyond our current limitations and help ourselves to become better equipped to live more fully and with less stress. It's time to start learning how to live ready and head off further regrets. Remember, you are not what you do or don't do, that you are more than that, whether it's your time to develop these skills or not. Your time will come if you get yourself ready for it and welcome it into your life. Also, you are not the story that you make up about yourself. You are not too old, and it's not too late for any of you. These are skills that I'm talking about. And just as you learn to walk, talk, and tie your shoelaces, if you do these things, you can learn executive function skills and strategies no matter what age you are. You are not defective or less than as a person, as a human being, because you don't yet know how to focus your mind when and where you need it to be focused, or prioritize, or make effective decisions. Did you take a class in school and learn these things there? Probably not. Speaking of classes, I'm hosting a live masterclass on the number one way to move beyond the years of damage from undiagnosed ADHD and executive function dysfunction in early January 2020. If you feel stuck and want to move beyond all the wreckage of your past and get into action, please join me on either January 3rd, 5th, or 6th. You can find the information about the masterclass and to get yourself registered for one of those dates and times at my website, drbarbaracohen.com/2020. It's almost time for some new content, but first, let's celebrate a few wins. Perhaps you became willing to keep your word to yourself and others, no matter what. That's a huge win. Or maybe you had a difficult decision that you needed to make and committed to a date to make the decision no matter what. That's the spirit. And maybe you decided that you've been taking yourself way too seriously and you're going to play and laugh more than you have in some time. That's a great win. Celebrating a win today, even if it's been a really tough day, that lets you acknowledge that at least something is good about today, and that's important even in the worst of times. You are a precious child of this universe and are called a human being, not a human doing, for good reason. You don't have to earn your value by what you do. You were born with it. Your value comes from who you are, not what you do. Got it? I hope so, because you're going to keep hearing me say it over and over again because it's so important to your self-esteem and your quality of life. So let's transition to the content for today's episode and what you can start doing today to turn your life around. How much time do we have? Not much. So let's get to it. Today's 3 great topics are focus, prioritizing, and decision-making.
This podcast is sponsored by Pure Potential with Dr. B. You can head over to drbarbaracohen.com and find the podcast transcript. Great free content, plus information on programs and services, including the groundbreaking Adventures in Achievement online coaching program and one-to-one services with Dr. B. That's drbarbaracohen.com.
Now back to being an adult with ADHD in today's world and learning the executive function basics. So what interests you? What is interesting to you? Because focus goes where interest exists. And if interest doesn't exist, we don't focus. It's really a very simple formula here that says you need to know what it is that's interesting to you. And where can you figure that out? You can figure it out by looking at your life. Where does your focus and attention gravitate to? What do you focus on? That's telling you what you're interested in. It doesn't matter things that are like urgent and the world tells you or other people in your life tell you that these things are important and you need to focus on these things. Because if they're not interesting to you, you're not focused on them. That's how it goes. And that's not the end of the story, meaning, oh, so I'm not interested, because I hear this a lot from people I work with. Is like, well, I didn't find it interesting, so I couldn't focus on it, and I couldn't do it, and I couldn't stay with it. Well, to me, that doesn't fly, because yes, we're identifying the first problem, which is our focus goes where interest goes, but we still need to focus. That means it needs to be interesting. And if it is not automatically interesting to you, we're going to learn how to make things interesting, because interest is what gets us to focus. So if we don't do that, we're not going to focus. And we're just going to use that excuse that says, well, it wasn't very interesting and I had a hard time focusing, as if that's a reason. And it's a reason that many people use, and it's a reason I'm sure I used, but that's going with feelings. You may as well say, well, I didn't feel like it because it just really didn't move me. Woo-hoo. You know, I mean, it's like, I wasn't moved, so I didn't. You know, and then so I would ask, if you said that, I would ask the question, so what moves you? Because clearly things move you. All of us are moved by things. And those are the things that we need to either infuse into the things that we do and need to do that aren't all that interesting. Because it's not like each of us was born with this template of things that are interesting. And those are the only things that are going to be interesting. Because if you look at your own interest pattern, things have been interesting to you over your lifetime and have changed. Like, I've been interested in various different physical activities, sports, camping or hiking or swimming or jogging or trampolining or treadmills or going to a gym or not going to a gym or free weights or machines or thinking about physical stuff or dance classes or all these different things. And I've moved through all these different things, and it's changed over time because my interests have changed over time. But the one consistent in terms of focus is I was interested, and it was physical. Because what I know about me is I am interested in being physically engaged. So it doesn't really matter where I physically engage, so long as it's interesting, it benefits me, it gives me what I'm looking for, then I'm still meeting that need and I didn't drop it out. Same thing when I was a kid. So, but do details make it interesting for you? Does newness make it interesting? If it's really simple, does it make it interesting? What makes something interesting for you? Half the time people don't know. They just say, new, bright, shiny object, you know, squirrel, whatever it is that we say, instead of identify it. Because if you know what it is, you can look for it in other things. If you don't know what it is, then you can't look for it and you can't infuse it and you can't do other things to make these other areas of your life interesting. It doesn't just show up interesting or not. Guess who's responsible for making it interesting? Us. Us. You know, we've taken this passive approach to it's not interesting, as if it's supposed to knock, knock, knock on the door and go, hi, I'm really interesting. Come over here. I'll show you how interesting I am. And it's like, me. I want to be curious. What's interesting about that? What can I find that's interesting about that? The color, the shape, the sound, the whatever I could find that's interesting. Something, because that will grow. That's the whole point. What's interesting to you draws you in, and that's where you focus. What's not interesting pushes you away, and you don't focus. And we can say this about things, people, places, things, everything. You meet someone, they open their mouth, either you're attracted and you focus on what they're saying, or you don't, because you find them interesting and you focus, or you don't find them interesting and you don't focus and you tune them out, which is a real problem for friendships and intimate relationships and even work relationships, because people do this because he, she, it isn't interesting. So I'm getting to that. So what we focus on grows. Which means if you focus on the nasty attitude of a spouse, an employer, a client, whoever, and you focus on the negativity, that negativity grows, and it's like it almost takes over what it is that you think and feel about that person, place, or thing. Because the more you focus on it, the more it grows in intensity and draws your focus. So going back to some previous workshops that we've had where I talked about, for example, with weight and body and physique and all, this idea of, oh, I hate my hips, or I hate my arms, they swing in the whatever, or my chin or my face or whatever it is, or my belly, my butt, whatever we're talking about, men or women. And so I hate that part. So I focus on that part. And I keep focusing on how much I hate that. So my focus grows until I have this hateful relationship because I'm really focused. But I'm focused on something very, very negative, and that just keeps growing. Instead of what I talked about in that previous workshop in terms of focus was that focusing on gratitude, focusing on the thank you, also grows those things. So if I focus on being grateful that my solution of the past is the problem of today, but at one time it was a solution. And I'm grateful that I had that solution. Instead of focusing that I'm so pissed that it's this huge problem in my life today. It's only because I let it ride. Well, one reason I let it ride, and the short-term solution that was a quick fix in the past was not meant to go long-term. It was a quick fix. I didn't look at it that way. I took it as a long-term solution that ultimately became a problem. So now I have this problem that really was a solution at one time, and it's me I have to look to and say, oops, I let this go too long. It was really supposed to be a short-time fix to get me through this period of time, and I still have an issue to address. And so I've got to address it, and not by beating myself up or being angry or frustrated and focusing on all that negativity, because again, guess what? Focus on that, it grows. You can make yourself into a hugely depressed, negative, messed up human being by focus. That's why I want to talk about focus this way, because wherever we put it and whatever we focus on with the intensity and emotional charge of the focus, boom, is bigger and just keeps growing and populating like we're starting a whole society of negativity on this one point. Who wants that? I don't want that. So I'm really selective about what I focus on. Not because I want to be daydreamy and checked out, but I'm really selective because I know what I focus on is going to grow. And so it's not denial. I'm not running away, but I am focused on that tiny, tiny little thing that I did well yesterday. That's what I'm focused on, because that little seed of what I did well is going to get such praise and pat on the back and woo-hoo celebration of a win, because what I focus on grows. So I'm going to focus on the seed that's going to grow bigger, that's going to become more and more other little seeds that populate of wins for me, which is why I have such a big thing with wins. Make something interesting. Once you know, you got to look for these elements in everything and find ways to put that, see that in all these different things. You might think this is really silly. I gave a couple of examples here. Relationships with friends or loved ones, that we can lose sight of what's interesting about them. So we start to look elsewhere, or we tune them out because what we don't like starts to override what's there. And all of a sudden it looks really out of whack and really imbalanced, like this is a sucky relationship and I'm not going to be here. And it's like, why? Because what I'm focused on is what sucks. So of course that grew. And I'm out of here because, in either mentally, physically, whatever, because I'm focused on what sucks. Instead of being focused on the fact that There's two qualities that they have that are absolutely amazing, which attracted me in the beginning. Those things are still there. And just because I can't get everything else that I need and I want from that person, those two things are really important to me. And so I'll take those two things, focus on those, let those grow in how I interface with that person, let's say, and then decide when I've shifted my focus, is the relationship better? Because I know when I've done this, the relationships are better. They didn't change. I changed. I started looking at what it is that I like about them and I like about the relationship instead of everything I don't. Because it's very, very easy for us to gravitate to, but he, but she, they don't, they said, they would, they didn't, I'm so pissed, I'm so disappointed, I'm so upset. And whether it's a child or a partner or a colleague at work, whoever, a boss, it doesn't matter. What is good? Because when you change it, and now it feels better for you, you're in a better place, your focus is better, your head is more clear to move ahead with other things that are good for you, and start reframing how you see a whole lot more things and where you're putting your focus. And lo and behold, your mood starts to shift. Physical ailments shift, mental and emotional things shift, all kinds of things shift. And where I see this is going is we shift it as far as we can with what we are capable of doing. And if we get to the point where the balance isn't enough based on just what we can see is really good, and we say that, yes, that's really good, I'm really satisfied there, and still there's lack for me. And I can get all these other things met with other people, places, and things, and still the person I work with or the person I live with, that I have signed up my life with, still needs to be able to do certain things with me, for me, that are really important for me. And if they can't, only then am I in a better place to decide if it's enough or it is not. But deciding from the trench, all the way deep down in that horrible space where everything is ugly, on whatever topic we're talking about, is not the place to decide or even consider a shift in career and job and change and partner and living and all these kinds of things, because we're in such a crappy place. Everything looks like crap. So we have to get to a clearing where we are in a better place for ourselves, so that what we focus on and what we can see, we see with more clarity. Because further on, we're going to get into decision-making strategies. If you can't focus clearly and see clearly, and the ingredients you are using to make a decision are bad ingredients, your decisions are not going to be good decision outcomes. They can't. There's like a formula for making decisions, like cooking or baking. If you put in crappy ingredients, it's going to taste like crap. There's just no way around it. It's not like wave a magic wand and, oh, it's a miracle. I use these really cheap, crappy ingredients, and I got this most amazing dish. And it tastes wonderful, and I just love it. It's like, yeah, throw it in the trash. I'm not going to have that. It's the same thing with decisions. The ingredients that go into decision making have to be good ingredients, healthy ones for us, so that we can have a good decision outcome. It's just what it is. You just can't get the other from the crap. So, all right. So the other example that I gave here also has to do with jobs and career. That you can lose sight of what's interesting about your work, because so much of it isn't. And I talked about this on a previous call, this idea that if we focus on, well, I hate this and I hate this and I hate this and I want to leave, instead of, why did you take the position in the first place? Well, I love the people there and I hate the work. Cool. Now you know something about the position and what is making it such an upsetting thing for you to be there. So what can you do to shift and change your focus on what you love and why you get up in the morning? So if what you love are the people and you don't love the paperwork, for example, then when you go to sleep at night, what you're focused on for getting up in the morning is all the cool people you're going to hang out with, because that's going to get you out of bed. And yes, you're going to be faced with the paperwork, but then we can do a workaround there because we can figure out how to make the paperwork fun. I know that sounds like weird or disgusting, but I've done it. I can teach you guys to do it, but I want to get you to the place where you're focused on what's cool about going someplace, whether it's work, whether it's home, whatever it is that you want to be there so that it feels good to you, okay? So how do you get yourself to focus? When you need to, where you need to, how you need to, for the purpose you need to, and stay focused for as long as you need to. And again, the quote, what we focus on grows. So I'm telling you, people that play video games do not have any trouble focusing for hours. They focus on that. They stay with it. They stay as long as they need and want to because it's interesting for the reasons that it's interesting to them, because I don't play those games. That's not interesting to me. Whatever those are doesn't capture me, but it captures a lot of people. And so if it did, I could see myself playing, but it doesn't. I know what other kinds of things capture me and keep my interest, and I stay to the end for those, but I don't even engage with the other stuff because it has no meaning for me. I want you to explore what this is for you. Look at examples in your life that say, I would never walk out or leave this ever because it's so engaging and captivating for me. And this thing, man, gone in a heartbeat, can't even get into it. Just so you start understanding that there's actually evidence that you can use that's going to be really helpful for you to make changes. So I'm going to move on to prioritizing, which I know is a huge problem for many, many people. And again, I'm approaching this differently, starting out with what is prioritizing and why do it? You know, so many people talk all the time about, I need to prioritize. I don't know how to prioritize. How do I decide what's first, what's second, what's third? What is prioritizing? So I figured I'd start with something to get us on the same page from my perspective, which prioritizing is putting an order to things. What's going to be first, what's going to be second, what's going to be third. Really generic. And it's done so that you do first things first, which perhaps means, but not always, that the most important thing goes first. But as I put here in a question, how do you determine what comes first, as in what's most important, if you don't understand how to prioritize? It's like this catch-22. Like, I would put what's most important first and prioritize that if I knew what it was, and if I understood how to prioritize. So I almost have to know how to prioritize before I can prioritize. It's just this cycle that just keeps going, which is why people get stuck, and everything looks like a 10. You know, it's kind of like those jigsaw puzzles that are all white pieces. And it's like, where do you start? There's a box with a cover that shows you a shape. All pieces are white. Where do you start? You know, the instructions I read one time said you start at the edge because you can work from the edge and get pieces to fit and then work yourself to the middle because it's the only place where there's form and structure. You can't just start in the middle if they're all the same color and all these different shapes, because there's no boundary or parameter or shape or container to even get started. So that's kind of a crazy example of how you would prioritize all white pieces and where you would start, because at least there is a starting place because there's some evidence of shape. But what I put here, prioritizing involves focus and criteria. It's like, to be able to prioritize, you have to have a couple of things. So you have to be able to focus, like I've been talking about, but you also have to be able to have criteria. So the first one here is deciding, and this is true for all prioritizing, decide what the end result or the outcome needs to be before you can prioritize. What's the end point? So my first example is running errands. So let's say that I have 12 errands, 15 errands, whatever it is. So I gave you a flow of how I prioritize errands. I make a list of the errands for the day, because I tend to like to do my errands all in one day and set aside time, because stopping and starting to go run errands, I lose too much time, and it just doesn't work well for me. So I tend to work my life in themes, like now I'm doing errands, now I'm doing emails, now I'm doing phone calls, because I'm in that same frame of mind, and I can power through 12 phone calls or 12 emails because I'm in that mindset, much more than if I have 12 emails and 12 phone calls and 12 this and 12 that, and I'm trying to work them all in throughout the day. That never has worked for me, because there's too many transitions, and transitions means losing time because you got to reorient. So I have found working in themes so much more effective. So my example of errands, I make a list of the errands for today. I indicate next to each of the errands the distance from where I am, my home or my office. And then I plot the journey, starting with the errand that's furthest away. And I start with the furthest away errand, and I work my way back to my office or home. And the reason, which I put here, that I do that is, if for some reason I have 12 errands and I start with the furthest and I only get halfway through or even 3/4 of the way through, and I got 3 errands left, unless those 3 errands are life and death and had to happen in that time frame, barring that, if they were just errands, then I know I can jump out in the course of the day and get the last 3 errands done because they are the closest to my home or my office. So I always start with what's furthest away, which would obviously take me longer to chunk out the time to go the further distance. So if I have an errand to run that's like 40 minutes away, 30 minutes away, I start there. And I just kind of plot it on a little map. And I go there, then I go here, then I go here, and I'm just working my way back to my place and seeing if I can get them all done before I get back. I also know when I'm running errands, typically I don't go for a leisure trip. I'm kind of on task. I'm focused. What I'm focused on for me is kind of beating the clock, and I do kind of a competitive thing with myself, which is I have, let's say, an hour or 2 hours to run all these errands. And I know if I don't waste time and I just go and do what it is I went there to do, I can get them all done, barring an accident on the street or something like that. So it's like start the clock, go to the furthest, start working my way back, and I usually can nail all of them and get them all done, and it's a win. It also teaches me how long it takes me to run my errands, because if I think that, oh, I could do 12 in an hour and a half, and I'm not realistic because I never timed them, because I never looked, because I never saw what's really involved in going and doing those errands, and it's really a 3-hour trip, not an hour and a half, and only get through half of them. That's really good to know too, because the next time I run those errands, I have really valuable, important information to help me do a better job of setting up the amount of time that I need to allow to run those errands. So what I put here, this strategy is based on the criteria of time and distance. That is the criteria I'm using for this. Moving on to the next one, this example has to do with how to address email overwhelm and interacting with email, which is a huge problem that people have presented to me because we live in a world where there's no boundary and it keeps coming. The regular snail mail keeps coming, the emails keep coming, everything keeps coming, and people freak out because they get overwhelmed because there's no boundary. And so here's what I did in terms of how I prioritize. First, I decided on a color coding system for my emails. And I did that because I felt that it was really important to be able to see the ones that are color coded that are most important first. So I color code colors that are interesting and attractive to me for things that are my most interesting and important emails. So my emails from students and clients are color coded in colors that are interesting and attractive to me that I see immediately. So there could be 100 emails that come into my inbox, but everything that is color coded that way, I see right away. I can pick them out of the lineup. I address those emails first thing, and they get taken care of. And so what I put here is I color code them. I decide when each day I'm going to take care of emails, because some people take care of emails all throughout the day. And basically they're being run by their inbox. Oh, something showed up. I see there's a little envelope there. Oh, something else showed up. Something else showed up. Instead of having boundaries and not having your focus be on looking at that little thing to see if there's envelopes there that happen to tell you there's mail. Because one of the problems with regard to email, if you think about it this way, is it's someone else's agenda. It isn't yours. You know, we have become a society of responders and reactors to other people's agenda. Perfect example, at work, a boss says, I'm sorry, you need to stop doing this and you got to get this done. And it's like, really? I have all these other things that you told me need to get done, i.e. priorities. And it's like, no, this is a bigger priority. And it's like, all right, so just to be clear, these 3 priorities that you told me are priorities that need to be done by 5 today. Now it's going to be replaced by this other thing that you say is the bigger priority. So I'm not going to try to figure out that it is or it isn't. You're telling me, you're my boss, that this is the bigger priority and these 3 can wait until after this thing's done. Great. So I'll get started on this. But if not, because now the responsibility is them. They're the one that told me to change the workflow. They're the ones that are going to have to know that I don't necessarily going to be able to complete those other 3 if this is a big project. But they said it's priority and I need to do it because they're the boss. So same thing with emails that come in. Deciding when you will look. Deciding what kind of emails you get. Do you get emails from people that are crisis, meltdown, life and death kind of emails? Because if you don't, typically, there is no urgency to be a reactor. There isn't. It's choose the times you want to look and see what people have sent you. And from a business person perspective, what I was taught is 3 times a day. My choice of the times, but 3 times a day. So I set up my structure that I look, and I am looking for those top-notch, color-coded ones from, let's say, students and clients before I start my workday for appointments. I look at that first, and I address that. And then same thing at lunchtime. I look for those, if there are any of those, I address that, and at the end of the day, that. Those are my priority emails. All the rest of the emails, when I go to my inbox, I put this in the notes, I need to know what my focus and intention is when I go to that dangerous place. Because it is. For people who find, oh, wow, look at that. Oh, look what this person is doing. Oh, this looks like a really, really interesting, whatever it is. It's like, excuse me? Why are you there? Oh, I'm here to see if any clients or students sent me an email and need to hear from me. That's why I'm here. I remind myself, this is training. When I go on that little journey of, and it's like, why are you here? I have to be focused. So my focus stays with why I'm there. I'm not there for all the subscriptions that are coming into my inbox to read them before my day starts. Sorry, that is not the time I'm reading that. I use a specific email address that's like info ad or whatever I use to sign up for anything I've subscribed to. That all stays together, and I mark out time in my calendar, however frequently I feel it's important, to do that reading and to subscribe, unsubscribe, whatever I'm going to do with it. Because texts are like the upper echelon level beyond emails. Texts come in all the time. I know, massive. It's like people used to call, then people used to call and leave phone messages, then people pretty much stopped calling and leaving phone messages, and people start emailing. And then a lot of people stopped emailing and started texting. And texting, again, the same thing. It's like other people's agenda. Just because someone texts you in the middle of an appointment with a client, or when you're with your family, or you're on the job and you're in the middle of a project and a text comes in, if it isn't dangerous for you to do, you look over, you see who it is, and you see a little preview of the message, and unless you are expecting some urgent something, that text is going to wait until the time that you would do email or phone calls or anything, because we're still talking about other people's priorities, other people's agendas. It's like someone coming to you, it's like someone calling, so you, and you're at home, whatever, you pick up the phone just because you do, and they start talking. And they don't ask you, is this a good time to talk about this? Do you have 10 or 15 minutes? Because I really need to talk about this. They just launch. And it's like, I had to learn, talking about boundaries, which we've talked about, to have boundaries that says, time out. I would love to hear about this, talk to you about this. I'm in the middle of this right now. The best time for us to talk about this will be this time or this time. Which works for you, and we'll talk then. And that's if I oopsed and picked up the phone when I shouldn't have. Otherwise, it goes to voicemail. And there's times that I've done that because it's an old pattern, and I pick it up because I can, not because I should. And when I do it and I shouldn't have, that's what I do, because otherwise I'm disrespecting myself, because that is not the time for me to be on the phone. And I know it. And I've just interrupted whatever else I was doing. So the priority has to be, you decide when it's most effective and best for you to do the text, to do the other. And like I said, I choose 3 times: before I start my appointments, at my lunch break, and at the end of the day when I'm finished with clients, students, work, things like that. And I'm wrapping up, and I usually have dinner first, and then I do that, and then I'm done. And I close out for the day. I've also set, in terms of a priority, the priority of personal time in the evening, which means, when does my workday start? Because I work for me. It has to stop. It can't just go until I'm going to bed, because then there's no personal time, and I'm always just working. And so I realized that and had to set boundaries around that. How to prioritize career decisions. And some of you are looking to make transitions with work or to expand on that. So I felt it was important to give an example on this. in terms of writing out what it is that I want the outcome to be for my work life. What's the picture of that? What's the end point? And then to write out what is involved in reaching that outcome without lots of details or any particular order. It's really just a brain dump. It's like, what is it going to take me to get there? If I have to go to school, if I have to this, if I have to that, whatever it is that I need to do, I just need it out of my head so I can look at it. What I do is I use Post-its or index cards or anything that's movable. And once I get all that information, I start moving it around and I start looking at flow. And like we talked about once before with my silly example of dressing and showering and eating, is like, you could get dressed and then take a shower, but you'd have to get dressed again. So if you were laying that out in terms of priority, the priority is you would shower first and then you would dress. And eating could come before the shower. Eating could come after the shower before you dress, if you wanted to put on a robe or just a towel or something, you were really hungry. But it isn't logical to get dressed and take your shower, because you're going to have to get dressed again unless you want to walk around wet. So I find that putting them on Post-its or index cards and laying them out and looking at the flow, it's much easier for me to see the priority and the flow and the logic of how the flow is going to go when it's out of here. And so same thing here of looking at all the moving parts of the journey having to do with work and evaluating the different options in terms of what it looks like, deciding the criteria that you're going to use to make your decision. And then, because we've talked about parts before, you got to get a yes from all the parts of you. Because if you're going to make a decision, and I'll go into this with decision making, you got to have thumbs up from all parts of you, because if all parts of you aren't saying yes, there's going to be sabotage like crazy. Because the one part that's the holdout that says no is going to derail the whole thing and is not going to let you prioritize. So you may say, like, you've made a decision, you feel really firm on it, you want to prioritize that, you say that's really, really important to you, and yet continually your plans are upset and that priority does not happen. If that is the case, I'd be hunting for the no vote and the saboteur, because some part of you is not on board with how you're prioritizing what comes first. For a lot of you, family comes first. I feel that that is a very important principle. Pink's my family, and so her needs are very, very important. It's a priority. If you have kids, they're a priority. If you have spouses, you might feel they're a priority. If you don't have those things in your life and you have your work and you have a pet or a companion, it's like work might be a priority or your friends might be a priority. But knowing where your priorities are, where does that come? It comes from your values. Our priorities, how we prioritize things, come from our values, which we've talked about before. So if we don't know what we value, again, how are we going to prioritize? It's like if I value personal time and downtime because I need to replenish me, that is a value that I value that, which means I'm going to prioritize that and make sure that's in my day and not work till 10 or 11 o'clock at night, because then there's nothing and I go to bed and I had nothing like that for me to replenish me, because sleep isn't that kind of replenishing. It's a different kind of replenishing. But I can only get to that through my values, to know what I'm putting first. So moving on to decision-making strategies, I just put a few. The Ben Franklin approach I've talked about before is this pro and con thing on a piece of paper. This is what my dad taught me. It never worked for me. He told me to take a sheet of paper, fold it in half so there's a crease, and then on one side the pros, on the other side the cons when I wanted to make a decision. So I'd write out all the good points, I'd write out all the negative points, and he'd say, so with that, make your decision. You have everything that you need. And I would look at him and go, I don't have everything I need. How can I make a decision from this? These are good points, these are bad points. I feel like it's eeny, meeny, miny, mo, flip a coin, I may as well do that so I can see the good and the bad. But how does that fit into making a good decision It feels too arbitrary. And what I learned about that approach is that there's no way I ever could go back in time and track my decision-making process with that approach to know why a decision worked well for me and why a decision didn't work well for me, and how to improve on the outcomes of my decisions for future decisions. This did not do that for me. So what I found was the criteria approach worked very well for me, because criteria, again, is based on my values and it's based on fact. What is not negotiable? So that if I'm trying to make a decision about what school to go to, if I want to go to a university, so what is my criteria? Hypothetically, my criteria might be based on how far away is the school, if I was going to go locally, because if I'm a commuter student, I want to be able to get there and get back and not lose a bunch of time. So time might be an issue. Money for the school might be an issue. Reputation for the school has never been a criteria that's been important to me. That's why I left UCLA, because I couldn't learn there. Got a great reputation. Would have been nice to have my degree from them, but I couldn't learn in the way they teach there. Learning style and educational style, size of classes, how you get taught, how you show that you learned, all these different things are criteria for me that I learned that help me make decisions for the right schools for me once I finally learn this about me. But if I don't know what's not negotiable in terms of things that lets me succeed and what is negotiable, like the money might be negotiable, but not the style of teaching. Because if the style of teaching is right for me, I'll find the money, whether I'm taking a student loan or whatever, which I did. But if the style isn't right, then it doesn't really matter what the cost is, because I'm not going to be able to learn from them. So there's that. The imagination approach, trying on different options to determine what's best for you. I use this a lot. I use it after I use the criteria approach, because once I know what the criteria is, then I like to play. So I did this when I got my vehicle. That was 20 years ago. It was obviously a very good decision, because this decision has lasted me 20 years with no regrets. And it's because I did the second and the third thing on this page is I listed my negotiables and non-negotiables for a vehicle. And then I did the imagination approach, where I basically put myself into the vehicles in my head and put myself in a day in the life of Dr. B to see how easy was it to do my life with the vehicle I was imagining was mine. And it was a hoot to do that. I would just go and sit in the vehicle. I didn't have to buy it. I didn't have to return it. I just sit in the driver's seat, and it's like, okay, it meets all the negotiable and non-negotiable criteria, so just close your eyes and imagine this is yours. And what's a day in the life of you? And I found all kinds of things that I hadn't even considered when I did that as to what made vehicles good or not good for me. Everything from aesthetics, loss of space. Like I have an SUV. I have a Ford SUV Explorer. I've had it for 20 years. I love it. I love it because it's spacious enough that I can sleep in it if my camping conditions aren't great. It's big enough so a crate can be in there for pink. I love it because the spare tire, does not take up any room on the vehicle. It's underneath. So it's not on the inside where I have to smell rubber. It's not like on the back side where I have to look at it and it doesn't look attractive to me because I have a thing about seeing the tires on the back. I just don't like the look of that. And so going through all those things, it gave me the most amount of space and this and that and all these different things. And yes, by standards today, it's a gas hog, but I don't do that much driving. And so that isn't a consideration because I knew I don't do a lot of driving compared to other people I know. So paying for the gas isn't the biggest thing. It's all the comfort things for using that vehicle. And it's just been wonderful for every year I've had it, and it's still going strong. So that's what I do in imagining and making choices. Without criteria and a context, it's impossible. It's like if you say to me or I say to you, so where do you want to go to eat tonight? And how are you going to make that decision if you don't have criteria and you don't have a context? So the context might be, it's been a tough day and you don't want to go to a noisy place. You want a place that's quiet. You want food that isn't heavy because it's hard to digest heavier food, particularly going out later to eat. And so you have this criteria and you have this context, which is about meeting your needs. So if your needs would be met to go to supper because it's lighter food, a more quiet environment, not far from your place, easy to get to, you both can get there and enjoy a meal and conversation and hear each other, and that's the context and the criteria, and you take that and you measure that against all the other places you could go to eat, and none of them are as good a decision as that for that night's criteria, then you know where you're going. And if someone were ever to ask you, why did you choose that restaurant? It would be very easy to trace your decision and say, the reason I chose that restaurant is because it's quiet, the food is light, we can actually hear each other in conversation, this, and this, and you know why. So that lets you track back the decision. Was it a good decision? Was it a good meal? Did you enjoy it? All the things that were important to you. And then you know you made a good decision and you know why. Otherwise, it's flip a coin, you don't know why, it just turned out okay that time. And not so much with men, but women. Women have been known, culturally speaking, to think that their decisions are based on luck. The way that women think about making decisions, they think of it as they were lucky. It just happened to turn out well for them. They don't know why it turned out well, but it turned out well. I don't know if any of you can relate to that. You can nod if you do. But the idea, or smile, the idea of if you think that the good fortune you have or the bad fortune you have is just based on luck, you're in a tough spot because you can never duplicate what you got. You get a huge success or a huge win, and you can't duplicate it because you don't know what decisions you made in order to get that. And if you have something that isn't a win, you can't duplicate what it is that you did and change what you did to not end up with the same outcome. And let's say have something that doesn't work out for you, because the decisions are not based on luck. The outcomes are not based on luck. We make decisions that should be traceable. Fact, data, criteria, everything that went into making the decision so that we know how come we succeeded. Because if we know how we succeeded, we can repeat it. There's a teacher that I have, many teachers I have these days that talk about rinse and repeat. And it's like, do it again. If it worked and you know what you did, do it again. If all those criteria and everything fit that new situation, and the likelihood is it's going to be a win again. It's like having a winning recipe with the right ingredients that you put in, and you keep using those ingredients until you learn when a decision doesn't quite work out that you need to change a few ingredients in order to get the win. But you don't have to dump everything you did to get the win. You just have to evaluate what ingredients in that process of making that decision weren't good ingredients and caused the decision to not work well. Not the whole recipe usually. So it's not like scrapping and starting from scratch. So like I put here, it's impossible to correct for something that doesn't turn out if you don't have anything to look back on. People who don't track things can't improve on them or change them because you have nothing to work with. And then I put in here for a recap, on focus and prioritizing and decision-making strategies. What you focus on grows, so choose carefully because it's going to multiply. But you have to know your priorities before you can prioritize. It sounds goofy, but it's true. If you don't know what's most important to you, like if family's most important to you, then when you are asking yourself, how do I prioritize my day? You know that family's first and everything else is prioritized around family. Or if your health is your number one priority, then everything is prioritized around your health. Whatever the top priority is based on your values, what's most important to you is what other things are built around. But we have to know that to be able to prioritize. Start with the end in mind and work backwards, reverse engineering. It's like you can do this step by step. It's like saying, when I wanted to get a PhD, so to get a PhD, what do I have to do right before I'm going to get the PhD? Well, I have to be in a course of study for a PhD to get that degree. Okay, and what kind of course does it need to be? Well, I had to find a school that works for me. And being in that school, what do I have to do before that, and before that, and before that? So maybe I'm starting way back here that says, here's the outcome I want. And when I reverse engineer it, in order to have this, I have to do this. And in order to have this, I have to do this. And in order to have this, I have to do this. And I can work it all the way back to where I am today. Which meant to do what I wanted to do when I started on my therapist career was I had to go to school, I had to do hours, I had to get all the hours, then I had to apply to take the exam, and I had to do an oral exam, and I had to do a written exam, and I had to this, and I had to that, and I had to do this internship, and all these different things to get to that place, to have that thing. If anywhere along the way, some part of me voted no, it would have stalled, and there would have been sabotage. And I have to get yes from all the different parts of me that say, yes, we'll go to this school. Yes, we will study this, but we will not take a full load. We will not do it the traditional way. We will do it the way that we learn best so we can feel good about being in school. That approach and that way of making the decision got me a thumbs up from all my parts. The other way of deciding by the name of the school, the reputation, what it would do for me, all that stuff, those got lots of no's. So it took a long time to get through school until I could get to the place where it was the right school and the right way to teach me. And then it was a yes, and I powered through. So it showed me the power of that. Be aware of any saboteurs and address them because you need yeses or you're going to get tripped. And then I just put here as a closing thing the thank you letter to the saboteurs. Like I was talking about earlier on, it's parts of us that now we see as the problem, but they were once the solution. So yes, they may feel like they're sabotaging your efforts now, but at one time you were grateful for them because they were the solution. This could be, and it's been for me, people in my life that were the solution at one time that then became the problem. There were jobs in my life, same thing. There were so many different things at various points on my journey that were the solution at one time that became a big problem for me after because they were short-term solutions. And I treated them like long-term solutions. So I learned that I had to write thank you letters to those solutions and those parts of me and be grateful. Thank you so much for being so loyal and making me stuff my face every single day of my life and hiding food and doing all of that and everything that I did, because you know what? Doing that kept me in an okay place, moving forward and doing whatever. And sure, I put on weight and I this and I that and all those things, but you know what? You got me through. And because you got me through, and I was trying to get through, I wasn't trying to create a weight problem and all the other problems that got created from that. I was just trying to get through. But getting through, that was a short-term solution to get through. And I kept that long-term solution as my go-to solution, which was continue to stuff my face. It became a problem. And so now I had a new problem to face. And I learned to really pay attention to whether something can be a short-term solution. And if it is a short-term solution, do not ignore the fact that it is a short-term solution, and be ready to work on a long-term solution so that short-term solution does not come back to bite you in the butt because you let it become long-term. That's where so many health issues come from and other kinds of emotional issues come from, because we skate and we jump over different things and we go, I'll get to that, but I'm okay now. Well, the I'm okay and I'll get to it now. Meanwhile, what I left sitting over here is getting bigger and bigger and bigger because I didn't relieve it from its post and put something else instead. And that's on me. And it has never served me and doesn't serve any of you to beat on yourselves. We all do this because it's what we know to do. We live in this kind of world. Quick, 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 get a solution, keep going. And we do. But we need to earmark it somehow and say it's short term. And we need to say thank you and be grateful that we came up with a short-term solution because it got us through. We survived, or whatever it's about. But now, as we're getting through, we need to be focused, back to the beginning, on what is the long-term solution here. You know, it can't be, God, I can't pay my bills every single month, so I borrow money, let's say, from my parents, and so now I'm good for this month. But that's a short-term solution, so I'm good and I'm safe and I'm not on the street. But I immediately need to be looking at a long-term solution, because that short-term solution only put out the fire today. And there will be a fire 30 days from now if I don't have a new long-term solution. So I do not get comfortable when I take on a short-term solution and put out a fire. I know that that's my top priority to pay attention to, because it has been tagged, so to speak, with a short-term solution that cannot stay that way. And I do not want to create a long-term problem, because I've done too many of those in my lifetime, and it just makes me really unhappy, because I'm adding problem after problem to my life that I then have to go back in my life and solve those things instead of seeing what they were for and not doing that to myself.
I trust that you can hear yourself in my examples about focus, prioritizing, and decision-making. Hearing isn't enough, so don't stop there. You need to commit to yourself to make the time every single day to take some small action and small step that moves you forward, and use some of what I've shared with you in this episode. You can do this. You can. A favorite quote of mine. Albert Camus said, "There is no happiness if the things that we believe in are different than the things that we do." Are you waiting to be happy when something happens that you say will make you happy? And what if it doesn't happen? Will you stay unhappy? I hope not. Time passes quickly, and it's time for you to be happy now, since now is all that any of us have. This moment, here, now. Remember, what you focus on grows. If you focus on your past and the mistakes that you made or things that you didn't yet know, you're going to contaminate your present moments with regret or past pain. And if you focus on your future and all the what ifs, you'll create worry or anxiety about what may or may not happen. Remember, it's the future and it hasn't happened yet, and you're having your pain in advance. It's important to plan for the future, and yet keep your focus on the present moment, right here, right now, and what you can do and how you can do it with what you have now. Look at your strengths, because we all have some that we can tap into and leverage to improve our situations. Whether you're learning from my podcast episodes or live videos or working with me directly, you're in my world, and I'm here to serve your needs. So be sure to reach out and get your needs met. It's up to you to take action here so that things can change for you. And in case this is your first listen to my show, my website is being redesigned and will be providing you with more streamlined experience, as well as many resources that you may not have known that I share with my community for free. So be sure to make your way over to my site, which is drbarbaracohen.com, and check out the resources that are going to be showing up over these next few weeks in case that's something that would be of interest to you and serve a need that you have. Since so many of you in the USA and abroad have written to me expressing your suffering from the years of damage and wanting to know what to do to move forward and live more fully, that so many of your stories are painful and raw, and I'm sure that's not the half of it, what you share. Thank you first for trusting me with what you have shared. You aren't going to want to miss out on the live masterclass January 3rd, January 5th, or January 6th on how to do just that. I'm excited at the thought of you and thousands of others finally having the opportunity to move beyond the damage and create a new life path for yourself. How awesome is that? To not be tethered to the damage and thoughts of being less than or defective, and instead stand tall as you move forward in your newly created life. Be sure to head over to drbarbaracohen.com/2020 and choose the date and time that best suits you to attend live, and I'll see you there. If you've been a listener for some time, I trust you know by now that I get you and I've lived through most of the same things as you all have. The only difference might be that I've learned what I was missing and gotten to the other side, and I'd love to help you do the same. I remember how unfocused and overwhelmed and stressed I was so much of the time, especially when it came to making decisions, which is part of adult life every day. I appreciate you showing up to listen today and in the future. I'm making my way back to producing regular episodes, and it feels really good. Be sure to subscribe so the newest episode will automatically be in your feed. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your friends and family, as well as rate the show. If you'd like to do a little more, write a thoughtful review on iTunes so I know that I'm meeting your needs. I'd love to know if today's episode was valuable for you, and if so, in what ways. I'd love to hear from you, so feel free to drop me an email at drbarbaracohen.com. It means a lot to me to know that your life is getting a little bit better each and every time that we get together. Be sure to check out the show notes for all the resources I've referred to today. I hope to see you in the Facebook group, Living Beyond ADHD, enjoying the live videos that I do on my Dr. B Face page, following me on Instagram, as well as in the live masterclass in just a few short days from now. That is, if any of this is of interest to you and would benefit you. Thanks for listening. Until the next time, bye for now.
Thanks for your undivided attention. If you're eager to make positive changes in your life, head over to drbarbaracohen.com to see how Dr. B can help you today. Whether you love making changes with community support in a group environment or prefer one-to-one coaching or psychotherapy, you'll find all the information you need to get started at drbarbaracohen.com.